Namaskar. My name is Holly Wakastora and I'm a senior certified Iyengar yoga teacher, and today we're practicing yoga for releasing the ties, the Granthis, the knots that bind you to the cycle of samsara, birth and rebirth, as a result of avidya, ignorance. So we're going to practice knotted poses. We're going to tie ourselves up physically to untie ourselves yogically. So I wanted to read the definition for two Sanskrit words for you today from this book, which is a Sanskrit dictionary by John M. Denton. I can't recommend it highly enough. So I'm going to first read the definition for the word Granthi to you, okay? So one of the teachings in the Upanishads is that when all the knots, or the Granthis that strangle the heart are loosened, the mortal being, the temporary body, mind, become immortal. They realize through the teachings the joyful, pure, and eternal soul, okay? So this is the definition for Granthi. It is a knot, a tie, a knot of a cord, unreal and illusory complexity and ignorance. So we're going to physically tie ourselves up in knots to yogically untie these Granthis. Okay, and then later on I'm going to refer to, and it's going to come up very soon, the word akunchana, asana. So we're going to do an asana, a series of asanas that are called akunchanasana, okay, akunchana. So akunchana means bending or contracting, okay? So we're going to do that now by starting in prone shavasana. So I have 3 white blankets here, and I'm going to place the top of my thighs right below my pubis on the front edge of this blanket setup. And I want you to see how I'm releasing the tops of my thighs towards my toes and turning the front of the thighs in and the back of the thighs out. So, now from here, I'm going to take the right side of my, the spinal muscles on the right side of my lower back, out to the right, at the bottom of the rib cage, between the bottom of the rib cage, the top of the pelvis, the top of the pelvis, the bottom of the pelvis, and even the very top of the back of my right thigh. So this whole area here on the right side, from my bottom ribs to the top of my thigh, is not just moving towards my heel, it's moving out to the right, so that my outer right side of my rib cage, my waist, all the way from my armpit to my pelvis, my thigh to my knee is moving down and towards the floor. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. And if you need to, you can take your upper thighs wider apart. And see how I'm not just turning my toes in, I'm turning the back of my body, my lower body, from the top of my lumbar spine all the way to the bottom of my heel and the sole of my foot. I'm turning that out, away from the center and out to the sides. Now from here, I'm going to place my forearm down on the floor and move the back of my sternum forward towards my head as I take my buttocks towards the heels. So I'm not lifting myself up, I'm pulling myself forward, but I'm keeping my chest facing the floor. And then keeping from the outer right knee all the way to the right armpit, moving down towards the floor, that whole right side of my body, I'm going to bend my knee and pull with my hand on my ankle to bring my heel outside my hip. So I'm coming into a Asana on the right. And again, I'm not letting my chest lift up. I'm keeping my chest down and moving forward towards my hand. And then I'm going to see, can I take the part of my hand that's between my thumb and my index finger to the top of my foot and pull that down towards the floor so much that I'm able to turn my hand so that my fingers are pointing forward, and then I press my hand down to roll my shoulder back. And I want to feel that from the top of my lower spine all the way to the outer part of my buttocks, near where the buttocks meet the thighs. That whole area is spreading laterally out to the sides. And then I'll release that right hand and the right foot, take my right forearm across my chest. And again, I'm not lifting up. I'm keeping my chest down, and I'm pulling towards me with my hand to help keep my sternum moving forward in the opposite direction. Then I turn the back of that left thigh out, the front of the left thigh in, and I'm extending, reaching from the inner upper thigh towards the inner knee to bend my knee and reach for my foot. Now I'm going to press my foot back into my hand because that's going to roll my shoulder back, and then I can turn my upper arm from the inside out, and I keep spreading out across the clavicle and the top of the scapula as I pull with the part of my hand that's between my thumb and my index finger on the top of my foot. So I'm pressing it, pulling it towards me, and pressing it down and towards the floor. And again, I want to keep my bottom ribs down on the floor, pull towards me with my arm to move the back of my sternum forward towards the crown of my head. And then once I've pressed the foot down enough, I can turn the fingers easily. I'm spreading out across the top of the scapula and the clavicle as I do that. And then I'm going to take my forehead back down. Now, for the next stage, readjust yourself on the blanket. See that the bottom of your pubis, not the top, is down on the blankets. The top of the pubis has to stay up. So it's not the top down and the bottom up. It's the bottom down and the top up. Okay, now from here I'm going to place my right fingertips down on the floor next to the right side of my chest. Roll that outer left hip down to the floor and then take my right leg out to the right. Okay, now you do that too. Okay, now bring your right arm back on top of your left arm. Okay, now simultaneously, now keep the bottom of the pubis down and the top lifting up, and pull towards your the center of your body. With an exhalation, turn the right side of your pelvis, that outer right hip, down towards the floor and extend from the inner right thigh, upper thigh, to the inner right knee. Move the left buttock bone over to the left and the right buttock bone over to the right. And then if you can, with an exhalation, extend that right leg at the knee. Don't let the left buttock bone go towards the right heel. Move the left buttock bone over to the left, and the right buttock bone reaches towards that right heel. Keep the bottom of the pubis down, the top of the pubis up. And then bend the right knee and bring the right leg back to the center. Readjust the tops of the thighs so they're releasing away from the pelvis and towards the top of the feet. Readjust the pubis so the bottom of the pubis is down, the top of the pubis is lifting up. Now take that left hand next to the left side of your chest, lean on that outer right hip, and take your bent left leg out to the left. Now from here, you want to move that right buttock bone out to the right, the left buttock bone out to the left, and turn the front of the pelvis from the left to the right. See that the top of the pubis doesn't go down and the bottom lifts up. Keep the bottom down, raise the top up. Now with an exhalation, stretch that left leg at the knee joint so that your inner left heel is in line with your inner left upper thigh. Now with a deep exhalation, into the tops of your thighs, your lower abdomen, all the way down into your pelvic floor. Move the right buttock bone to the right, left to the left, and bring the bottom of the pubis down and lift the top of the pubis up and away from the floor. Then bend your left knee and bring that left leg back to prone Shavasana. For the next one, you're going to turn the blankets. Now, I'm showing this with 3 blankets, but you could use a stack of 10 blankets to do what I'm just showing you now, okay? And the stages that came before. Oftentimes, Bekasana, Ekapada comes better, and even full Bekasana, when your knees are down, your hips are up, and your pelvis is supported. So now I'm going to sit in Bandha Konasana. Do you see how my knee is not in line with my hip in Bandha Konasana? It's out to the side compared to my hip. Okay, now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring this right knee forward from my right hip so that my right knee is facing the same direction as my right hip. Then take my trunk down towards the floor and shoot that left leg back and towards the wall behind me so that my left leg comes back into prone Shavasana. Now I'm pressing my outer left hip, waist, armpit down towards the floor so that there's a transfer of weight over to the left side of my body and away from the right. And then to come back up, I roll over to the right and pull my left leg out to the left and back to the center. And here I am in Bandha Konasana again. So now I'm going to take the left knee in line with my left hip. And again, I want that left buttock bone going over to the left. The right one is going to go over to the right, and I have to bend forward over my left leg to shoot that right leg back and towards the wall behind me. Now I'm bringing from the outer right knee to the outer right hip to my waist to my armpit, that whole outer right side down and towards the floor. The right buttock bone goes over to the right, but keep the left one moving over to the left. Move the back of your sternum forward and press it down and towards the floor. Feel that transfer of weight from the left leg over to the right side of the trunk. You can even use your left arm to help you do that. To come back up, you have to roll over to the left to bring that right leg back to the right. So you could also repeat this sequence by lowering yourself to the floor, one blanket at a time, until you're able to practice hip extension on the right leg, down on the floor, and then taking that leg away from the midline, abduction, and then flexion. I like to use the mat to help me see where I am here. Flexion and external rotation. let's practice the Supta Padangusthasana cycle and look for the relationship between Supta Padangusthasana, what we just did down on the floor, and Supta Padangusthasana stage 1, where the leg is up. So what I want you to see is that when I take my left leg into Bakasana, that's extension on the left hip, or at the left hip. And that's going to help me keep this left thigh closer to the floor, this leg that's stretched out, as I take the right leg up for Supta Padangusthasana stage 1. Okay. So you're going to take your blanket. We're practicing a mild, medium, then intense, then supremely intense, 4 different stages for Supta Padangusthasana cycle, okay? So do you see this corner of the blanket? I'm going to take that corner of the blanket and release the buttock, the right buttock out to the right, but take that corner of the blanket and just right against the right side of my sacrum so that it holds my sacrum in place and my pelvis in place as I rotate my leg. Or not just rotate, but mobilize. So this is creating stability in the pelvis as I flex the right hip. And if you're able to hold your big toe, you can do that. As I take the leg out to the side, see how I'm keeping my thigh turned in enough just so that my leg stays in a neutral position and my toes don't turn towards the floor. And then with an exhalation, deep exhalation into my lower abdomen, the top of my thighs. At the pause, I'm going to bring that foot down. Now, keeping the knee and the thigh where they are, I'm going to bend the knee. So I'm not letting them come up and away from the floor. And you can keep using your belt if you need to. And take that right foot up and over towards your left shoulder. See how I'm using my 2 hands on my foot and I'm pressing my ankle into my hands, but I'm also pulling on my ankle with my hands to bring that right foot over towards my left shoulder. Now with an exhalation, I'm going to pull my right shin over towards my right knee and press my right inner foot towards my chest. And then I'm going to take the right leg back out to the right, to the Parshva stage of Supta Padangusthasana, and then up. Okay, and then over to the other side. So, try practicing Ekapada Bakasana on the right leg first before you take the blanket into the left buttock, right at the inner buttock, so that the blanket is actually pulling the buttock out to the left. And then if you don't need the belt, you don't have to use it. Now I want to line the center of the right side of my chest, up with the center of my thigh, up with the center of my right knee, up with the center of my ankle, as I stretch that left leg up. Okay? So in fact, I'm going to take my shoulder over to the right and then release the left leg out to the left. And it's not just that I want my the right side of my chest to reach towards my right hand. I want what's the center of my pelvis to reach over to the right, not just near the navel or even at the center of the pelvis, but even the center of the pelvic floor is moving over to the right. And then from here, I take that deep exhalation, and in the pause, I bring that foot closer to the floor. Then, keeping the knee near the floor, I bring the foot up. Can you see that? And I hold the foot with my two hands. See how I'm making the sole of my foot face you? Now, with an exhalation, I press my ankle into my hands and I pull with my hands on my ankle at the same time. And I'm thinking from the center of my pelvis, I want to reach out to the periphery of my body, from the core to the periphery. And then with an exhalation, I'm going to take that left shin over to the left and bring my foot closer to the center of my chest. If you can, bring your foot and your head together. Then that left leg back out to the left, but from the center of my pelvis, I'm reaching out towards that right hip as I take the left leg out to the left, and then bring it back up, bend the knee, place the foot on the floor, and extend your leg. Now, pause the video and practice that same cycle again, either with the blanket, if you're able to keep the two sides of your pelvis level, or practice again with the blanket if you need it to keep the two sides of your pelvis level, or practice without the blanket if you're able to keep the two sides from rocking and rolling. You want to keep, it's like your boat, your pelvis is a boat on a lake, the surface of a lake on a windless day, okay? So, and then you're going to practice the intense stage, which is where you, like in Guruji does in Light on Yoga, exhale deeply into the lower abdomen, into the pelvis, into the top of the thighs. Keep that right buttock bone moving towards your left foot as you bend your elbow up and out to the side. And bring your head and your shin together. And then bend your knee. You're going to turn the front of that right thigh to face the wall on the right side of you. Pull your elbow back towards the floor, down towards the floor, over to the right, and use your left inner elbow to help hold that outer right ankle in place. So you can push your ankle, press it into your arm. You see how that turns my right thigh out more? And then I lift my head, neck, and the back of my chest up and pull down with my left elbow, inner elbow, on that right ankle a little bit more. Then see how I move from that outer right hip all the way to the back of my armpit. I move that forward towards my right leg and upward. And then I see, can I bring that left hand to the thigh? Then you're taking that right leg up and out to the right. Now, from the pubis all the way to the center of your chest, the center of your body, from the pelvic floor actually to the top of your chest, the center of your trunk is moving up and over to the left as you take that right outer heel down towards the floor, keeping both legs stretched out straight throughout. And then back up, bend your knee, and extend your leg. And then pause the video and repeat on the other side. Remember to check out the notes in the drop-down menu, for the sequence in the drop-down menu to the right side of the title of the video on the YouTube page, my channel page. Okay, now we're going to practice Upavistha Konasana. And Baddha Konasana. So, from Dandasana, taking the right leg to the right and the left leg to the left. So this is Upavistha Konasana, but I want you to see how I'm not just taking my feet apart. My feet are coming apart. You can see I'm slightly knock-kneed, working all the time on straightening my legs. What I'm doing is I'm taking my, keeping my right buttock moving out to the right and the front of this right hip rolling in to the left. I'm taking my right foot out to the right. And then the left buttock out to the left outer pelvis in as I take that inner left upper thigh out to the left. So I feel a firmness at the outer hips and a release at the inner upper thighs. Now, if you need to practice on a blanket, please do so. So how do you know if you need the blanket? I'm going to show you from the side. So if when I went to sit in Dandasana, I was able to lift my sacrum and my lower back up and away from the floor, but when I took my right leg out to the right, my pelvis rolled, this right side of my pelvis rolled outward and backward, then I would use this blanket, corner of the blanket, to help keep me on the inner front edge of my buttock bone as I took the right leg out to the right and the left leg out to the left. So do you see how I'm able to lift from my sacrum up? Yeah, okay. Now from here, you're going to bend the right knee, bend the left knee, and come to Baddha Konasana. So see how my inner heels are pressing towards each other. I'm moving my shins away from my feet and towards my knees, and releasing the front of my thighs towards my knees, as well as pulling the back of my thighs away from my knees and towards my pelvis. And then I take the right leg back out to the right, left leg back out to the left. So if you're able to practice without the blanket, you'll do that now. Otherwise, repeat on the blanket. This time take the left leg in first, and then the right leg. I want you to see how I'm not letting my shins come forward. I'm not letting my shins come forward. At the knee, I'm bringing them back towards the wall behind me, even as I move turn the backs of the thighs out and separate the two buttock bones away from each other. And I'm keeping my sacrum, my lower back, lifting up and away from the floor. And I take the left leg back out to the left, the right leg back out to the right, and come back to Upavistha Konasana. Okay, now I'm going to quickly get my blocks. You get yours. Now, for those of you who were able to sit up on the floor in Bandha Konasana with your thighs down on the floor. Try. Otherwise, you're going to practice Bandha Konasana again from Upavistha Konasana, either from the blanket or from the floor. If your knees weren't quite at the floor, but if your knees were able to come down, I want you to see if using a block underneath your feet, but now see how I'm still pressing my fingertips down to the floor and lifting my kidneys up and moving them not just up, but almost like up and into my lungs. That's it. So, do you see how I'm able to bring my shins so that they're parallel to the floor? My knees are not up here. If they were, I wouldn't place my feet on the block. And also, it's not that my knees are down in line with my ankles and I'm rolling my pelvis backward and downward towards the floor. The top of the back of my pelvis is lifting up away from the floor and moving forward, not backward. Okay, now we're going to practice again either on the blanket or on the floor. Bandha Konasana. And then see how I move the shins towards my knees, and as I would in Virabhadrasana 1 or Utkatasana, I'm taking, not only lifting the shins up, but I'm pressing the top of the shins back and towards the wall behind me as I bring my chest down towards the floor. So I'm pressing the back of my sternum downward and forward towards my head to do that. And if your face doesn't reach the floor, you can put it on a block, either on the tall side, or the medium side, or the flat side. You can even take 2 blocks and put one on top of the other. See how I move the back of the chest to the front of the chest to bend forward? Now, if you were able to place your feet on the block, you're going to do that again. Watch this trick. You see how I'm turning the back of that thigh out? I'm moving the right buttock bone to the right, doing the same thing on the left side. Okay, here I am. Now I'm going to bend my elbows up and out to the sides. To bring the back of my sternum forward and downward towards the floor. So when I practice that at home, I practice a few repetitions of it first, working with increasing the amount of time that I stay, and I don't count time by time, I count it by number of breaths, because that's how the life of a yogi is measured, in the number of breaths. Okay? So now we're going to practice Upavistha Konasana. Again, so taking my outer hip around from the back to the front as I take my inner upper thigh to my outer upper thigh, and as a result, my feet come apart. So if you need to sit up on a height here and have a chair in front of you and fold your arms and bring your head to the chair, you can do that. The instructions for that are in my, as well as the image is in my book, Your Year of Yoga. Learning to Love practice, which is available at yogawithholly.com. Otherwise, I'm going to bend forward. You may need to place a bolster in front of you, but I want you to see how I'm containing myself. So I imagine that someone has their hand here on my foot and they're pressing my outer foot against my inner foot. I'm taking the outer hips, these outer sides of the pelvis, and rolling them in towards each other as I press from the center of the pubis out to my inner heels and extend forward. Now, as you can see, I can bring my chest to the floor, so I want to make this a little bit more challenging for myself. So I'm going to take my heels up onto the blocks, and I'm not going to press the backs of my knees to the floor. I'm going to lift them up and away from the floor as I bend forward between my legs. And then I'm going to bring these bricks in closer. And so are you. You can do this sitting on the corner of your blanket. You can also do this sitting on the edge of a chair, taking your legs wide and bending forward between your legs. So again, I'm resisting it's really the top of the shin at the back, up and away from the floor as I bend forward. And then see how I'm bringing my knees up to duck under. Now I'm moving the back of my sternum forward and downward towards the floor to do that. Keeping the top of the upper thighs pressed down to the floor as I move the back of my sternum forward and towards my head and down towards the floor. So practice that once or twice, 3 times if you have the time. And then I want you to see how I'm going to place my feet on the blocks. So I'm in Bandha Konasana, and then duck under, and I'm taking the back of my right armpit down towards the floor, and then reaching from my right shoulder to my right elbow, from my right elbow to my right hand, to keep my hand as close to the center of my lower back as possible. And then I lean over to the right and do the same thing on the left side. And I see, can I make that clasp of the fingers or hold the wrists? And then from here, I'm going to take my feet forward and bring my head down. Now I need to back my hips up a little bit so that I can get my head to the floor and bring my feet back with me. So I'm reaching from the back of the armpits to the elbows, to the forearms, to the wrists, to the hands. And then back up. Now, if you're able to practice Supta Kurmasana, you would do that now. So, very similar to the pose you just practiced. With your feet down on the floor and your ankles crossed. Now we're going to practice inversions. So, I'm going to come to Adho Mukha Svanasana, and it's because we've been tying ourselves up into a knot, I'm going to take my hands wider so that my outer wrists are at the outer edge of the mat. Take my knees and my feet to the outer edge of the mat, and then I'm going to move the back of my sternum towards my head and the front of my sternum towards my thighs as I press the top of the thighs back, lift the heels up, and I keep the top of the sternum at the front moving towards the bottom, and the bottom of the sternum at the back moving towards the top. And again, I'm thinking of how at the clavicle, the top of the scapula, at the abdomen to the waist, from the right side of the, from the center of the pelvic floor out to the right, I can reach towards my right hip, I can spread outward, and the same thing on the left side. So the left side of the left clavicle out to the left, the top of the scapula out to the left, spread out from the center of the abdomen to the left waist, and from the center of the pelvic floor over to that outer left hip. So I don't feel as tall in this variation of Adho Mukha Svanasana, but I feel wide. Not just outside, but inside. Now from here, those of you who can practice Sirsasana would practice Sirsasana. And if you can practice Padmasana in Sirsasana, you would do that now. And those of you who practice Sarvangasana, Salamba Sarvangasana from Halasana or Ardha Halasana would practice that now. And if you can practice Padmasana in Sarvangasana, you're going to do that now. And Pindasana in Sarvangasana, and Parsva Pindasana in Sarvangasana. Otherwise, you can practice Setu Bandha Sarvangasana with your sacrum on the block and your feet supported at the wall, either down on the floor or up on a bolster. So, I'm going to show you Padmasana in Sarvangasana. And since I'm going to practice Sarvangasana variations, I'm not going to use my belt. But because I've been practicing Sarvangasana for a long time now, over 20 years, I'm going to bring my cervical spine all the way to the base of my skull onto the edge of the blankets. And again, I'm spreading out across the right collarbone and the top of the scapula to open my chest. And now, once I take my legs over my head, I'm going to do the same thing. Then, to take my hands to my back, I keep spreading out across the top of the scapula and the clavicle. As I bring my elbow in, I don't jam my clavicle and the top of my scapula up against my cervical spine. So from Sarvangasana, see how it looks like the Parsva stage of Supta Padangusthasana, and then that bent knee stage. See how I'm bending my knee to get this ankle closer to the top of my thigh. And then I like to practice half Padmasana first, turn my left leg out, and then pull my shin towards my knee to bring that foot down. Now, once I'm here, I'm thinking in this bent hip stage, I'm thinking of how I moved the bottom of my pubis into the blanket. Now I'm going to move it back towards the wall behind me, and the top of the pubis forward towards the wall that would have been in front of me when I was sitting up. So bottom of the pubis back behind my head, top of the pubis down towards the floor and forward, bottom of the pubis backward and downward, top of the pubis forward to take my legs back up. And I'm pressing my feet and my ankles into my thighs to stretch my inner thighs up towards my inner knees and take them back towards the wall behind me. And then from here I can come to Padmasana. And Padmasana. And sometimes you fall out. But, like my grandfather used to tell me, get back up on that horse, kid. And I used to say, Papa, I don't ride horses. What are you talking about? But then I started practicing yoga asana and came to understand what he meant by getting back up on that horse. And how if at first you don't succeed, you try, and try again. This side is always harder. See how I'm using my hand? One hand holding the mat to help bring this knee closer to the shoulder. I use the hand to help me. One hand is holding the mat. You can also put a bolster behind you. And it's easier when I practice without blankets to get those knees near the ears. So if you're not practicing Padmasana in Sarvangasana, you can practice Supta Kurmasana. If you're not practicing Padmasana, when it's time for Padmasana, instead you can practice Karmic asana. And Parsva Karmic asana. So I'm exhaling deeply into the top of the thighs, into the pelvic floor, into the lower abdomen. And then come to Halasana. Lift the top of the thighs, the hips and the buttocks up. Look back at your toes. Bend your knees and spread the spinal muscles out to the sides as you lower yourself vertebra by vertebra onto the blankets. Now, in this yoga sequence, instead of it being more like a class, I was showing you what I did and talking to you about how you could practice the poses on your own. because this sequence comes better if you have the time for it, if you practice multiple repetitions, 2, 3 repetitions of the fabric softeners, the prone shavasana into the ekapada bekasana, into taking the leg out to the side, the akunchanasanas, or the bending and contracting of the legs, or the leg, you were lying on your abdomen, the leg, first you brought your heel to your buttock, then you took that same leg out to the side with a bent knee, then a straight leg, and then you started in Baddha Konasana and bent forward over that leg. Then so I would practice that several times, lowering yourself down from the one blanket at a time to the floor. Then we practice the Supta Padangusthasana cycle, mild with the blanket in the corner, outer corner of the sacrum, medium, no blanket if possible, without lifting the trunk, leg up, leg out to the side, leg bent, and then the intense version, the Adimatra stage, where you practiced like light on yoga, where you were lifting your trunk up and away from the floor as you brought your head and your shin together, as you hooked your ankle with your elbow and lifted your head up to bring your arm around behind you, and also then taking your stretched out leg all the way out to the floor. And then we practiced mild, medium, and supremely intense stages of Upavistha Konasana into Baddha Konasana and bending forward in Baddha Konasana, Adho Mukha Svanasana, as well as taking the Baddha Konasana feet up onto a support, if you were able to. And then different stages of Upavistha Konasana that sometimes found you ducking under your legs, also called Kurmasana, and ducking under your legs and between your feet in Supta Kurmasana. Om, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May all the knots that strangle your heart, that keep you from realizing the truth of the immortal soul, be untied through your yogic practices. Peace.